Hi, I'm Jessica Mallorie and I'm an artist, and today I'm going to show you how you can paint a sunset painting using acrylic paints. Just got some little tubes, a little bit of yellow, some red, a dark red, a little blue and a white is what you're going to need. You'll also need a couple of brushes, a big brush and a slightly smaller one. That's about all you need for this technique. You might want to pick up a little pointy one as well. It's up to you, see how you go. And you will also need a little bit of black, I forgot to mention, for doing the palm trees afterwards. So to get started, what we need to do is think about, when we're looking at a sunset, how we see this wonderful vibrant yellow and orange radiating through from the warmth of the sun, that wonderful bright colour. So we're going to first of all just get that on there. A little bit of yellow paint. I just popped those colours I've just shown you just out into my palette. Use a little bit of water if you would like, just to help it glide. And you want to just smooth that on using one of the biggest brushes you have. And it's just getting that base down. Okay, it's just thinking flat, it's not too thick, just smooth. That's a nice easy part of it. And you can then use that. What I'm going to show you, you can use that whenever you want to sit in front of a sunset and have a go at painting it from a view, maybe in your garden or house or in the window, or if you're out and you're lucky enough to get to see a beautiful sunset. You can then apply what I'm going to show you now to having a go at painting that. It's really quite nice and simple in the technique. So I'm just going to quickly get all of that on. Just trying to smooth that colour all over, bring it all the way down to the bottom. Lovely and flat. I'm just dipping my brush into the water here and there, just to keep it nice and loose, so I can glide that across nicely. And then come right down to here, a little bit more. And then over to around here. So just a little bit higher. Just because you do get to see so much of the warmth of the yellow and the orange, we do want to see quite a lot of that. So I've just popped a little bit more out. And I'm just bringing it up to here. And then when we get to around sort of 2/3 of the way up, try to, maybe 3/4 actually, then try to get the brush nice and clean in the water, giving it a good mix and wipe. And then take just a little bit of that red that you squeezed out and mix that into your yellow. So you just want to take just a small amount. I'm going to then just start to put quite an orangey red up here. And if you do that where this yellow is still wet, you can just stroke the brush backwards and forwards like that to allow it to just softly blend in. So you do need to do that before the yellow dries, otherwise it's a little hard. And then what you can do is start to get quite a bit of red at the top of the painting. So I'm just going to wash my brush, wipe it on a little rag or tissue, take my red and get a little bit of water as well, just on the brush, just to help it glide. And just bring that all the way up to the top. So that's just giving me a really good base. It's kind of the foundation, if you like, of what you'll need to have during the sunset. Don't worry about your lines being perfect. It's quite nice to have a few lines here and there anyway. So don't worry if you don't blend perfectly down here. And then just take a little bit of red, just using a little bit of water, nice big brush, bold strokes, just to get the job done. If you want to get on to the more exciting parts, so trying to just get all of that colour all over, so you no longer have any white canvas. Right, there we go. When you have that, you can then start to have a look at where we see, I'm just going to blend that down a tiny bit more there. Sorry, there we go. You can then have a look at where we see the darker bits in the sky. So if you're doing it from a photograph of a sunset or memory, or from your imagination, or just copying the stages of this, it's entirely up to you. What you want to do is think about where you see the darks, first of all. So you've got that base, you've got that rich foundation, and now you're looking at where you see all of the really dark tones of the sunset. And they're really important because their being there is going to make the lights look lighter. Okay, so just taking a little bit of crimson or just a nice dark red, if that's what you have, start to look at where you see your darker patches in your sunset, or you can do it like I'm doing and just start to place them just around. So I'm just stroking them in. So I'm pop a little bit here. You can leave a line, you don't have to blend it. You can blend it a little bit if you want to. You will see when you study a sunset that there are streaks and lines and wonderful shapes in amongst the sky. So let yourself be quite bold and relaxed about it, okay? And then when you feel that you've got a few areas that you like, I think that's probably enough up there in the red section. Then have a look at bringing that dark down a little and put some over here. You can just use your brush just on its side to get that kind of thin line, just streaking it here and there. You can put it flat that way and make a mark that is just a little bigger. And then here, a bit carried away. And then also, what I would like to put in my sunset is a little bit of water, just to show you how sunsets obviously reflect onto the water. If you're looking out to sea, or you're remembering watching the sunset on a beach, or painting from a picture, it's really quite nice to just get something into the horizon line in this particular painting, if possible, just to help you give yourself a little bit more depth. So I'm just going to pop a line here using that crimson. That is just going to, just for now, just loosely represent just a little bit of land that I see just off over here. The reason I'm doing it in the crimson colour, first of all, is because I want to have just a little bit of orange still down here, and I don't want to be getting too dark too quickly in terms of, say, using a blue or purple, because it could then start to make my colours muddy. So just keeping to the yellows, oranges and reds for a minute. You're just going to then take just a little bit of that red back into the yellow. You might need another little squeeze of yellow if you've used it all up like I have. Just going to squeeze a bit out. Take just a little bit and just make a little bit of orange. It's just red and yellow. For anyone who's forgotten. And then we're just going to then start to paint, obviously a little bit more red. A little tiny bit of orange down onto the water. If you've bought yourself a whole set of paints and you have an orange, then you could just squeeze out some orange as well and use that, obviously. Which I might do actually, just to use the set a bit more. Brush. And just place just here and there a few bright oranges just onto the water. It's quite nice to see just a little bit of orange falling down here. I'm going to pop a little bit up into the sky as well. I'm just getting a bit of orange onto the what will be the water's edge there. And then I'm going to start to put some in the sky. You want to see all the same colours in the sky and sea or lake, whatever it is. So getting that sense of reflection. So just a few little bits of orange here and there, if you'd like. Not really see that very well. I'm just going to add a little bit more yellow just to brighten my orange up a bit. Just because it's going over a red, it's quite nice to make it just a little lighter. Right, and then you have quite a nice base ready to go on to just looking at a few darker tones. We've got that nice base of those yellows, oranges and reds. So now I'm going to just imagine I'm looking at a sunset and I'm looking for where something might be even darker to the dark reds. You often see purple in sunsets and really dark greys and all kinds. It's really nice to just have a good look at one and see what you're seeing. I'm just going to take a little bit of blue, add it to my dark red. It's quite important that that's a dark red and not an orange red, otherwise it will end up going a bit brown. It's got yellow in. So I've just taken some blue, mixed it in with a crimson or dark red, and I'm going to now just look at where I see really dark tones coming into my sunset. I don't want to cover over all my reds, so just a little here and there. Don't get too heavy. Just gliding it on, building up your tones. If you bring your fingers just a little bit further down the brush when you're doing that, it's a little easier to be gentle and glide and be light. I just need a bit more. So I just need to get a little bit of dark red and a little bit more blue. I've got some blue. Mix that up. Lots of blue in there to make it turn purple. And then you can just drop just a little bit of that, just subtly. So go maybe onto a smaller brush or just go slowly at this stage. And now what I'm going to do now is just start to put my marks down in lines. So I'm kind of just stroking a line across. It becomes quite a stylized sunset, I suppose. It's also quite fun and quite quick, and it just saves you sort of fussing over it. In terms of blending, you can just pop the colour down. A little bit of dark on the water. And pop a little bit more up here. Just stroking it in. If you go over the line a little bit more in terms of repetition, if you just go like that, then that does naturally blur the edges a little, so you can do that, or you can just stroke it in and leave it there. Like that. I think I might have just a little bit more there. And then I'm just going to go back to my my land and just make that really dark. Okay. I'm using that really deep, rich, crimsony purple. I might just add a little bit more blue actually to the land. Just a tiny squeeze of blue has gone into there. So mix that up. I just quite like it to look a little bluer. And then there we go. Glide that in. Just try to get it so that you've got quite an edge. And across. And then maybe put a little hill. Rise to the land. Line across and try and make sure your horizon line is as straight as possible. You can always straighten that up a little bit more when it's a little drier as well, and you can also use the colours on the water to do that. I'll show you a technique in checking that it's straight. Right, so now I'm happy with all my darks. I'm going to now start to make some lights. Okay, I feel like I've got enough of those deeper tones. And I'm now going to add a little bit of white to my purple that I've got already made up. mix that through and just make a really nice light purple. So it's quite a plummy purple that I've got here. You can make it a bit bluer if you want to, or just go with that if you're happy. One I've got in here, the colours I've got here are slightly bluer. Just trying to decide. I might actually just go a little bit bluer, actually, because I quite like that. So just a tiny bit more blue. Mix that up. If it's made the colour go quite dark, then just add a bit more white. To mix that up. I'm going to switch to a slightly smaller brush now. So it's only slightly smaller. It's just like that. Using that quite large brush, and now I'm just going to one that's just a little bit smaller than that. So I'm just going to put my brush down. Give it a good wash first so that you don't let the paint dry on it. And then just lay it down. Never a great idea to leave brushes standing in the water. It's a little bit bad for the bristles. It can bend them, and it's also quite easy to knock these water pots over when you've got brushes with handles that long. So I'm just going to now add a tiny bit more white to that purple, just because I did make it go a little bit dark. So remembering that we are working into lights now, so do make it a light colour. So we've done our base, we've done our darks, and now we're going to look at where we see all the lights falling in the sky. So we'll start to just stroke over a bit of that lovely purple. See a bit gliding down here. Have a bit there. If you're doing it for your imagination, just put it where you'd like to see it. You don't have to do it exactly how I'm doing it yourself, you just want to follow the theory. Just to go for the background and then the darks and then the lights. It's really quite nice playing around with the gorgeous marks you can make by changing the pressure of your brush, seeing how if you scoop more paint and you lighten the pressure, what kind of mark you make. If you put the brush on the side, or having it flat. Just have a little play and have fun with it. Make that a little bit there. If your yellow is still wet, be really careful when you're adding purple, because it will turn brown. So if you notice that happening, just stop working over the yellows for a minute and come to somewhere else while the yellow has a chance to dry, or just take a break for a sec. It should dry within about 5 minutes, so you don't have to wait very long. I'm just building that up. I'm occasionally just dipping my brush into the water, just because I am trying to keep my my paint nice and sort of easy to glide. So you just need a little bit of water as you're going. Drop a bit there. And start to put a little bit down to the water. A little bit there. Maybe some here. Maybe a bit richer. You might have just a bit more in the sky. There. Okay, and then when you feel really pleased with what you have, in terms of all the slightly lighter colours, you're going to then start to go even lighter. I'm just putting a little bit more purple just along the bottom first of my canvas, because I just noticed I've missed just a bit on the bottom section. So now what I'm going to do is add lots more white to the same area. So scooping up quite a large amount of white and mixing that in. I want to make a really lovely light pink. It's quite nice to just really use up all those colours you've got on the palette and just think it's quite nice and easy to make those colours just by turning the same colour into a lighter version. I'm just spilling mine over the edge of the palette. Just practice that. And then when you've given that a good mix and you're happy, then start to look at where you see lights if you're studying a sunset, or just start to put them in here and there. So lovely bits of light pink. I quite like sometimes in some places where the paint is still wet and it does just blend a little, that can be really lovely. So as long as the colours are harmonious, like light purples and pinks, or yellows and oranges and reds, then it works fine. It's just when it's a strong difference, like with a contrasting colour, like yellow or purple, they're very bold when they're next to each other because they're contrasting, and when they mix together, they become very dull. So you don't want to mix your yellows into your purple. And I might just put just one or two thinner little bits of this pale pink just around the place. Nice to just have a few really fine little lines. You can go even lighter if you want to, by just taking more of your white. Just squeeze out a little bit more white. So now it's a really light pink. Just a bit of that, just here and there. Okay, so then what you can start to do is have a look. Sorry, I'm just going to add a tiny bit more. Sorry, because I was about to go on to the next thing. I suddenly felt the urge to make that corner a bit lighter. So what you can do next is have a look at where you actually see the sunlight falling, like we've got here, from the way that the sun is really sitting. Okay, so in this painting you can see the sun is here coming down, and that's causing that extreme light in that part. So to do that, you just want to give your brush a really good wash. Make sure you have lots of white. It's really important to have plenty of white on your palette throughout this project, or this painting, I should say. So taking just white on your palette, sorry, just wipe my hands. You want to touch just a tiny little bit of yellow into it, so it's not just pure white. And let's get some. So just taking a little tiny bit. You want to then make your white just almost yellow, so it's an off-white, rather than it being pure white. It's just that tiny little bit. And then we're going to have a look at where we see the sun to be falling, going behind this land, and just imagining it or studying it and start to glide some really strong bold lights. If you pick up the colour as you're doing, like I've just done, you need to wash your brush because you don't want to spread those colours in. So just wash your brush, be careful just to notice if that's happening. Skip up some more. It's easier if you put your brush flat when you do that, so you're not pressing in hard to the surface. But you can put a slightly smaller brush down and just glide your lines like that across, and it's a little easier. So just have a go and see what works. And then we just want to then take a few lines coming down, taking your time. Some strong light here. I can see a bit there. And we're moving down onto the water. And you want them to sort of stop and start in slightly different places. Oops, just mixed a little bit of pink into my white there. Might be all right, actually. Just add a little bit more white to it. Yeah, and a touch of yellow. There we go. And then you can just keep moving. I'm having to wash my brush quite a bit because it's quite wet. Just keep moving down. If you have to wash your brush after each stroke, then just give it a little wash before you try and glide on that clean, really light. You're just stroking it in, making sure you're really happy with how far it's going over, how bold it is as well. You want to see quite a lot of it. I'm going to come up quite a bit higher actually in mine. So I'm going to start to come right up to here. And a bit there. I'm just moving my brush like that, lightly, light pressure, just to glide some of it in a really nice loose way. And I want to have just a bit more down there. Again, just that loose section. As you come to the end of the line, just try and lift off the brush so it doesn't stop too abruptly. And then you can have as much of that as you want, but you can just see how important it is in terms of getting that sense of sunset. You've got to have that there. And then just make sure you're happy with the colour as it just touches the land, which really needs to look quite silhouetted. So the darker the better for this part. What I quite often do is when I'm adding the palm trees, if you want to add palm trees, then you can add a bit of black onto the land, which is really quite nice, just to really make that look totally silhouetted against the sunset, and it makes everything else look even brighter. So just for a minute, just make sure you're really happy with all of the little areas around before we move on to the next bit. I'm just wanting to just add a little bit more crimson here because I just stopped quite, I started, sorry, just quite far in to the canvas, and I just think it would be better if it just went right there. So just give yourself a chance. So just have a little check around, make sure you're really happy with the details. Okay, and then when you are, you can do a palm tree really easily just by getting a bit of black, just a small amount of black, pop it out onto your palette. If it's a new tube, just put the lid on upside down, press it, that opens it, squeeze them out. And then you can do this with the same paintbrush. You don't need to change your paintbrush. What you do need to do is get all the pink and purple off your brush, so it's nice and clean. And then taking some black, ideally give it 5 minutes just to dry it, make it a lot easier for you. For demonstration's sake, I'm just going to pop this in now so that it's you don't have to wait, but if you find it's just likely to smudge and pick up all the other colours, then just take a break for a minute and then go on to do it. Right, so taking a little bit of black, just decide where you want to have your palm trees. I'm going to have one here, that's going to be the middle of it, and I'd quite like to have one here. So I've just put a little blob of black where I'd like them to sit. So that's the easiest thing in the world to paint. It's so nice as a simple technique and yet so effective and looks so good. If you just come from that centre where you decided you want your palm tree to sit, stroke upwards, first of all, just in a little flick. Then making sure you've got lots of paint on the brush still, spread those bristles, using the bristles, spread that black down, like that. And then just want to get just a bit more black. Squeeze quite a large amount of black out because we're going to need quite a lot actually. There we go. So then making sure you put it on quite nice and richly, because we are having to go over those colours. There we go. That's better. I just didn't like how my palm tree was looking a bit grey. Right, so we've got one branch there, and we have another one coming up over there. Another one there. Just kind of map them in. Let them have a little point to the end. We have one there. And we're going to have a branch there. And here you can do your palm tree whatever size you want. You can have it so that it's really little if you want, or just quite nice and big. And just make sure it's got a lovely rich covering of the black. You don't want them to be too thin. They need to be silhouetted. So you don't want the line to be broken. You want it to be nice and solid. Okay, and then when you've mapped it all in, take a little bit of paint off the brush and just come back to each one and just flick out like that. Just flicking down. Just trying to make it look all nice and sort of rugged and windswept like palm trees are. So it doesn't need to be all neat. It wants to have slightly bent branches and broken bits, you know, it's fine. Picking up the white a little bit there, so I'll just have to dab a little bit of black over that in a second. You can just come back if it's turned a little light in some sections and just squeeze a bit more out. And then just get a nice trunk for the tree. They do have quite a bendy, thin shape, don't they, palm trees? Let there be a little bit of a bend. Again, trying to make that as black as possible, so you might just have to get it mapped in, leave it to dry, go and do the other one, and then come back and just put a couple more bits of black on. I'm going to do this other palm tree first before I put a little bit of black onto my land. So just give my brush a little wash just to get some of that paint that's getting a bit thick. And then have a thick branch there. And here. I like to map all my branches in first. And keep it on here. Just have as many as you want so that they're all different. Okay, and then when you feel happy with the general shape, you're going to do the same technique again, which is just to come up underneath each one, making sure it's just the underside, not the tops, and just let those leaves come down. So you can take a bit of paint on the brush to do it, or just do it with what's on there already. And like I said, just don't worry if it goes a bit wonky, because palm trees are wonky. Okay, then when you've got that, pop the stem in. I'm just slightly overloading my brush there, sorry. Right. And then you can put your trunk in, sorry, not the stem. Just bring that down. Nice, rich, saturated black, because it needs to be silhouetted, remember. If it's breaking up or having any little gaps as you drag that paint across, fill it in. And then I'm just going to come back over to my other one, put a few more little bits here, because that just went a little grey, because all the underneath painting is wet. So make it easier for yourself and just let it dry first before you do the palm trees. And then you won't have to have that problem. And then just a little blacker there. A little bit more there. There we go. And now I'm just going to put a little bit of my black onto the horizon, that land that's falling on the horizon. Just coming along here. Just have it just black in some parts or all across, which is quite nice to make it as dark as you can. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I just said there was a technique to check that you have got your horizon line straight. It's really helpful if what you're painting is dry first before you do that, but if you have had a chance to let it dry, then just put your finger here at the bottom, pinch your paintbrush and just have a look at that measurement. And then what you can do is do the same thing on the other side. So I'm just going up to the land, keeping the fingers really still, and then up to the land on that side, just to make sure that that's not leaning. So it's a really nice, simple technique that you can use just to make sure it's nice and straight. You don't want to go, oh, it's finished, and then stand back and think, oh no, it's leaning. And then just make sure you're really happy with the edge. Move that tiny bit there. And then there it is. So it's really quite simple. It's a really nice thing to do and then apply to the painting of sunsets that you're looking at when you're on holiday, or if you're just out enjoying a sunset. Here, it's just a really nice way of approaching one. It's just a lovely, easy, fun technique. So I hope you really enjoyed that, and all the best. Take care. Bye.